Injustice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it smiles at you behind a chipped ceramic coffee mug. Sometimes it greets you at the door of a roadside diner in rural Georgia and says, "Morning, folks, just checking in." That's what the Brooks family didn't see coming. They were just looking for breakfast eggs, coffee, a quiet booth by the window. But in a town where racism still simmers just beneath the maple syrup, what they got instead was suspicion served hot, and silence so thick it felt like humidity in July. Calvin Brooks' husband, father, retired, something. People in town just saw a tall, calm, black man in a gray t-shirt. What they didn't see was 22 years of elite training, 12 covert missions, and a man who once dismantled armed militias without raising his voice. What they didn't see was the wrong man to underestimate. Before we dive into the moment, everything spiraled before the officer reached across that diner table and grabbed Elijah's arm like he owned him. "Do me a favor. Tell me where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever had to stay calm just to stay safe. And subscribe because tomorrow, we're exposing a school principal with a secret racist policy she thought no one would ever uncover." Now, back to that Sunday morning. The kind where the sun looks soft, the roads are quiet, and everything seems still until it isn't. The Brooks family had just packed up their weekend bags, fueled by grits, laughter, and Marcia's playlist of old-school gospel. They didn't know their trip would take a detour into the underbelly of small-town justice. They didn't know the coffee would be lukewarm, but the danger would be boiling just beneath it. The sun rose slowly over the edge of Savannah, painting the oak-lined road with amber light. Sunday morning carried the sleepy scent of wild jasmine and damp wood from the overnight rain. On the gravel driveway, Calvin Brooks gently closed the trunk of his sleek black SUV, deliberate, quiet, precise. No one noticed, but even closing the trunk was done to a rhythm Calvin followed unconsciously. "Did you check under the swing?" Marcia asked from the front seat, eyes flicking toward the porch of Aunt Leona's house, though her focus remained on her phone. Her voice was calm but firm, the same tone she'd used raising kids and teaching unruly classes for 10 years. "Checked under the swing, behind the washer, and in the spice drawer," Calvin replied evenly, and where Elijah hid his phone last week to avoid doing his probability homework, "Dad," came a groggy moan from the back seat. Elijah, 17, lanky, still waking up but glued to his screen. "One time too many," Calvin said, locking the doors with a sharp beep. He walked around to the driver's seat with the controlled, fluid motion steps taught and ingrained from his time in the SEALs, where every movement could be the difference between life and death. Marcia watched him and for a moment let a small smile show in her eyes. "We taught him to face challenges. Right. Not to run from them." Calvin nodded, his hand tightening on the wheel before starting the engine. The SUV pulled away from Aunt Leona's pale blue house, past the white picket fence and bougainvillea echoes of childhood memories. In the rearview mirror, Calvin caught sight of his son. Elijah had nearly caught up to him in height, his voice deeper and thoughts more focused than a year ago. The same kid who once hid his phone now applied for engineering scholarships, building flying robot models powered by imagination and stubborn determination. "Hey, Dad." Elijah leaned forward between the seats. "What Aunt Leona told us last night. Is it true? Did you really swim through sharks?" Calvin kept his eyes on the road, a faint smile playing on his lips. No sharks, just pissed-off dolphins. Angry dolphins. Elijah raised his eyebrows. "That can't be real." "Territorially aggressive," Calvin replied calmly. "They're picky creatures." Marcia laughed. "You're not helping make it sound any more believable." "I wasn't trying to," Calvin mumbled, turning onto Route 17. The three of them shared a burst of laughter under the golden dawn. They didn't know that in just a few hours. A different kind of silence would fill them, not the cozy hush of their car, but a razor-sharp quiet in a small roadside cafe where black faces weren't exactly welcomed with hot coffee and warm eggs. They didn't know what lay ahead, a subtle battle where one look could shake the entire room. But the man behind the wheel, the nice black guy in everyone else's eyes, had survived manhunts in Kandahar with that same look. 25 minutes later, their stomachs growling and morning drowsiness replaced by breakfast hunger. Marcia studied the GPS and pointed out a sign ahead. "Elijah. Look," she said, nodding toward the right side of the road. They saw a weather-worn wooden sign, Mama Ray's Diner, biscuits like Mom used to make. The white letters were smudged. The board tilted as if last hurricane had nudged it off balance. "Seems local," Calvin observed, eyes scanning the area, instincts on alert. "Looks old-fashioned." Marcia scrunched her nose, but the smell of biscuits from here sold it. "Don't underestimate these places. Southern soul is in the grits and the fryer." Elijah chimed in from the back seat, eyes finally off his phone. Calvin turned onto the gravel lot, where a few pickups with local plates sat rusting in the sun. The restaurant's windows reflected pine trees behind like a sepia photograph. The red open sign blinked timidly. He parked short of the front door, pausing before exiting. Just long enough for Calvin to take in the details. 3 windows, only one with the shade up. Back exit sign partially obscured by trash bins. Inside, slow, regular movement. 1 woman, 1 cook, and a pair of police boots at the coffee counter. He said nothing, only nodded to Marcia, reassuring her, "We're good." They stepped out. The southern morning air wrapped around them warm, heavy, with notes of hot plastic, cicadas, and salty bacon from the diner. Familiar, comforting sounds. Yet something felt off. Georgia seemed to be breathing slower today. The bell above the door jingled as Calvin pushed it open. Inside, time paused for 2 seconds, just 2, but noticeable. An old man stirring his coffee froze mid-move. A woman in a pale apron glanced at them, sizing them up. In the corner, a young couple whispered as if they were sure others shouldn't hear. Calvin led the way in with confident, measured steps. Marcia followed, her hand brushing Elijah's back, a silent cue. "We're not backing down." All 3 wore polos and khakis, not flashy, but here, their skin tone stood out more than any pattern could. The waitress approached, her hair pulled tight in a gray bun, uniform the color of cafeteria trays. She held 3 menus without making eye contact. "Table for 3, she asked, her eyes distant. "Yes, thank you. A booth by the window would be great," Marcia replied, calm and clear. They were seated at a corner table with red vinyl bench seats and a chipped wooden tabletop. Calvin sat on the aisle side, his back to the wall, eyes sweeping the restaurant, a habit dating back to 2005 in Ramadi. Elijah sat first, then Marcia. 3 coffees in front, and a silence not one born of hunger. Elijah opened his menu and froze. "Mom," he whispered, eyes fixed on the wall near the kitchen. Hung slightly askew above the mug rack was a Confederate flag, faded, yellowed, as though it survived countless years of grease and neglect from the Jim Crow era, yet still unremoved. Elijah swallowed hard and looked to his dad for a reaction. Calvin said nothing. His expression never shifted. He simply sat, silent, hands placed on the table, his gaze unchanged. Marcia drew a deep breath. She had seen that look before jumping from helicopters, before entering fog-shrouded insurgent camps in Iraq, and now, before ordering fried eggs at a southern diner. They'd seen enough discrimination to last a lifetime, but Calvin's reaction made others uneasy. Not because he was angry, because he wasn't. That calm belonged to someone who had swum through bullets, who could sense the enemy stepping through a door and knew he didn't need to raise his voice for everyone to hear. The waitress, Doris, gray-haired, returned with their coffee. No greeting. No acknowledgement. The motions precise but void of warmth, as if they were a stain on the clean white tablecloth of this polite town. Marcia whispered, "Thank you," and smiled gently. Doris said nothing in return. Elijah's eyes flicked to the Confederate flag, then to his father. Curiosity, disgust, and a tremor of fear in his gaze. "Is that normal here?" he asked quietly, careful of his tone. Calvin lifted his eyes from his cup. He didn't answer right away. He simply looked slowly, steadily absorbing everything in the room like an X-ray. From the flag, to Doris turning her back at the counter, to the old soldier at the table opposite, and back to their own booth. No one spoke, but everyone felt the shift. The room grew even thicker, not from humidity, but from Calvin's eyes, a quiet clarity that made the place stop breathing. The old soldier turned away. Doris paused mid-wipe. The young man in the corner folded his napkin. Elijah sat straighter. "Dad, you're not saying anything." Marcia slipped her hand under Calvin's. No words, just a firm squeeze, reminding him, "You're still you." They'd faced darker places, Coronado, boardrooms filled with lip-service diversity. Not real inclusion. They weren't strangers to prejudice. But Calvin's presence quiet, unshakable, forced attention. Not from anger, from calm resolve. Doris came back to the booth, pen in hand, voice raspy. "What'll you have?" Calvin offered a thin, respectful smile, military retired, but still sharp. Sunnyside eggs, crispy hash browns, and warm biscuits, and for the young man. He nodded toward Elijah. The waitress turned to him, her tone softer than before. "French toast and bacon it is." She scribbled their order and turned this time without slamming her pen, without glaring. The diner exhaled. In 2009, on a cold night outside Kandahar, a Taliban fighter raised his gun on a SEAL team from a rooftop, but he never had to fire. According to military records, he surrendered without engagement. When asked why, he simply said, "I saw a man looking at me from the distance. I knew I was dead." No one could confirm who that man was. All that's known is that Calvin Brooks didn't carry a weapon. He stood outside the protective circle and he watched. The bell above the door of Mama Ray's diner rang for the second time that morning, but this time, it wasn't gentle. It was sharp, purposeful, like a prison door slamming shut behind someone. Calvin remained focused on his coffee, not needing to turn. He could hear the weight in heavy footsteps, the stance of the person walking in, and the tone of the voice behind the counter. Black coffee, no sugar. A few regulars nodded greetings to the newcomer. Server Doris's expression shifted just a slight eyebrow lift, enough to reveal the weight of his presence. Rick Harlan, Franklin County's deputy sheriff, blue-eyed, pepper-gray beard, tall and authoritative, the kind of man who assumes he has the right to decide who belongs in any room he enters. Rick didn't walk directly to the counter as usual. Instead, he paused, then slowly strolled past each table, his gaze sweeping like a metal detector. But it wasn't weapons he was scanning for. He was scanning skin tone, looking for anomaly in his idea of order. And then he saw them. The Brooks family. A black man around 50, sitting upright like a soldier, eyes steady. A woman in a white shirt, direct gaze but not confrontational. And a teenager Rick hadn't focused on him yet. Not yet. He was still sizing up. The father. Rick stopped and hovered beside their table without saying a word, just standing there like a streetlight that could move. Calvin didn't look up immediately. He took a steady sip of coffee, as calm as if sitting in a library. Then, As if to be polite, he slowly turned his head. Their eyes met. Rick half smiled without showing teeth. "Morning?" "Good morning," Calvin replied, measured not warm, not cold. "Not often we see strangers in this town," Rick said, his gaze now openly interrogative, "especially on a Sunday. Interesting. We're just passing through. Stopped for breakfast before heading back to Atlanta," Calvin calmly explained, polite yet uninviting. Rick glanced at Doris, seeking confirmation. She didn't react, but her poise said enough this stranger disrupted the balance of the diner. From Atlanta, Rick raised an eyebrow. Big city. Busy. Complicated. "I suppose so," Calvin answered, neither shrinking nor advancing like a stone wall. Silence settled. Elijah shrank slightly under the table. Marcia placed her hand on her coffee, eyes fixed on Rick. Then Rick nodded as if mentally filing their image. He turned and strode back to the counter. But before sitting, he looked back and said, "If you need anything, just let Doris know. Round here, we don't leave folks feeling out of place." His words dropped into the diner like a cold stone in still water. No one laughed. No one spoke. Calvin lifted his coffee again. His hand was steady. His eyes followed Rick not with hate, but with the calm of someone used to judgment. He understood clearly now. He was the one with the real credibility. Rick sat at the counter, wrapping his hand around a coffee mug stamped with the Georgia state flag. He stirred gently, deliberately, his eyes still fixed on the corner booth where the Brooks family sat like pins on a whitewashed map. Doris stood behind the counter, drying an already clean glass. She kept glancing at Rick, as if waiting for orders, or justification that the diner still belonged to their kind. Rick took a slow sip, then slammed the mug down hard. The sharp clang made an elderly woman in the next booth jump, her spoon clattering to the floor. Shortly after, he rose. No one prompted him. He simply moved toward Calvin's table again. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Brooks," he began, voice neutral. "Just remembered last night there was a minor incident at the convenience store nearby." Calvin didn't respond, just nodded, inviting the man to continue. "Some guy same build as your son there, hoodie up, white shoes with red soles, took a few things and ran off." Marcia glanced at Elijah, his sneakers white with red accents. Not rare, but the overlap intended. Rick stared at Elijah directly. No plate info, but the description matches. Elijah's eyes widened. "I didn't." "We left Savannah around 7 this morning." Calvin spoke, calm and clear. "You can check traffic cam footage if needed." Rick still had that corner-of-mouth smile. "I didn't say he did it. Just trying to see if it possibly—" He gazed down at Elijah. "What's your name, kid?" "Elijah Brooks. ID on you." Elijah glanced at his parents, and Marcia squeezed his hand from across the table. "He's a minor, traveling with us," she said firmly, gaze steady at Rick. Rick's brow lifted. "Right. Law's the law. I only need to confirm identity. Small town, when strangers show up, we take note." From behind the counter, Doris stood frozen, coffee pot in hand. A couple at the next table had stopped eating. The husband leaned in to whisper to his wife, eyes still locked on the table. Elijah bit his lip, face flushing. That feeling an honor roll kid being treated like a potential suspect made his stomach tighten. Calvin didn't flinch. He watched Rick as if reading a gauge. He stayed silent, avoided reaction, observed. "I think," he said slowly, "you're asking not to find answers, but to keep asking." Rick smirked. "I ask because I have the right, and when there's suspicion, I have the right to confirm." Elijah isn't a suspect. Marcia spoke, voice firm. Nobody said he was... Rick snapped back, hands raised in mock surrender, just making sure, if everything's clear, no need for tension. He paused and eyed Calvin with intent. Unless, you've got something to hide. That dropped on the table like a dare. Elijah moved to stand up, but Calvin gently placed his hand on his son's shoulder, not forceful, just the touch. And in that look between them, Elijah understood, stay seated. Dad's handling this. The diner thickened, as dense as dawn mist lingering over old grease. But that weight wasn't from the food, it was from Calvin's gaze. Rick remained standing, looming by the table. His eyes no longer measured, they imposed. Stand up, Elijah, he insisted, voice clipped. I need a better look. Elijah glanced to his dad. He wasn't just a kid anymore. He was being summoned like a suspect. Calvin set his palm flat on the table, his eyes cold, steady, not the calm of someone yielding, but of someone who knows the terrain, a calm, born of training. Sit down, he said quietly. It's not time to rise. Rick scoffed. I'm asking for cooperation, Mr. Brooks. If he's innocent, why is he staying seated? He's a child, Marcia interjected, voice trembling slightly. He doesn't have to prove innocence when there's no accusation. Rick's jaw tightened. He took a step back, then sudden lunge to grab Elijah's arm, attempting to pull him up before the whole diner. Time froze. Doris gasped behind the counter. The next booth clattered forks. A soft "oh" escaped from someone. Then, in less than a second, Rick's hand dropped from Elijah's arm, as though shocked by electricity. Calvin had risen. No one saw his move clearly. He only lifted a hand delicate, precise like unlocking a door with a bobby pin. His fingertip pressed against a nerve cluster on Rick's wrist between the flexor and extensor tendons. A whisper of force, like a locksmith opening a lock. Rick stumbled back, eyes flared. Not in pain, but he was frozen, stunned for a full second. Calvin looked straight into Rick's eyes. Don't touch my son, he whispered, voice low as turning a page. I trust you understand the consequences. Rick stared at his wrist. He flexed and released, as if ensuring his hand still belonged to him. What did you do? Rick stammered. Calvin didn't answer. He sat back down as if nothing happened. Took a sip from now cold coffee. Marcia remained unmoving. Elijah inhaled, sat taller. He didn't know what his father did, but he knew this: his father just delivered a lesson no one in the diner would ever forget. Rick glared, face flushed. His hands trembled slightly. He stepped away, pretending to reclaim authority. But clearly, the power in the room had shifted. Years later, in a private FBI training on passive resistance, someone asked who was the first to use pressure point disabling with a finger, causing no injury. An instructor replied, "We learned it from a video source unknown filmed in an old diner in Georgia." The man was unidentified, but his gaze spoke louder than a name. Calvin was arrested without anyone shouting, "He's under arrest." No rattling handcuffs, no Miranda warning, not even basic legal formality. Just a nod from Rick Harlan, a quick phone call, and 3 officers strode into Mama Ray's diner as if they were there to get coffee, but they came for him. "We need you to come with us for questioning," a young officer said, avoiding direct eye contact. "Do you have a warrant?" Marcia jumped up, blocking their path. "Procedures will follow," Rick interjected, his smile as thin as a blade. "It's purely an administrative issue." "You have no right," Marcia replied, voice wavering with anger. "I have every right to detain someone under suspicion," Rick stated calmly. And your husband assaulted an officer." The diner fell completely silent. Doris muttered behind the counter. A man silently started recording, then stopped at Rick's glare. Calvin locked eyes with Rick. "You're abusing power. I won't resist, but I will remember every face in this room today." Rick didn't respond. He turned away. Calvin left with the two officers not in handcuffs, but not free either. He glanced back at Marcia and nodded slightly. To onlookers, it appeared cold. To his wife, it was a promise, "I'll come back. I won't break." They didn't take him to the town police department. No cameras, no records, no media. They took him to substation Napak, 4 deep in the woods, nearly 20 miles out. A featureless gray concrete block, no sign. Just 2 blurry cameras and a rusted steel door, like a boiler entry. Inside was strangely cold, not from air conditioning, but from the absence of humanity, only systems. "No, you have the right to remain silent. No, you are under investigation." No one said anything. Only eyes scanning, recording, presuming this one has no rights. Calvin was led into a small, windowless room, metal table, 2 old plastic chairs, and a fake camera in the corner. He spotted its deception in 3 seconds. The young officer from earlier entered, placed a cup of water on the table, and sat. "Your name is Calvin Brooks," he began, opening his notebook. "Former military. Rank." "Retired," Calvin replied. "Full service record. Protected under Department of Defense. It concerns a disturbance at a public diner. We have video. You ought to re-watch it. I didn't cause a disturbance, I taught manners." The officer froze, perhaps from the reply, or the look in Calvin's eyes, the same look that made enemy soldiers flee in Fallujah. Calvin sat upright, hands folded. His calm demeanor was unnerving and powerful. It made the other guy wonder, if I hold the power, why am I afraid? Marcia led Elijah out of Mama Ray's diner as if fleeing a fire, not injured, but still carrying the smell of ashes. Everyone's gazes were like fingerprints left on skin. "Let's go," she whispered, voice steady but hand trembling on the car door. Elijah didn't ask. He knew his mother didn't need words. She needed silent action. They drove 15 minutes to a roadside motel. The neon vacancy sign flickered mockingly. The manager, overweight, worn cap. Caucasian, looked at them as though they'd interrupted his nap. "Do you have a double room?" Marcia asked politely. "Show me ID and a credit card," he said without the slightest smile. Marcia handed over her card. He swiped and frowned. "Your card's declined." "That's not possible." She said, "I used it this morning at the gas station." He looked at Elijah as if he were wiring the meter. "I've got cash," Marcia said, voice firm. "We just need one night." "The room's taken," he replied flatly, as if talking about yesterday's weather. "But the sign, system error." He turned away. The exchange ended not in words, but in the precision of indifference. Marcia gripped her son's hand as they left. Elijah didn't ask, only sighed. They tried 2 more motels and a small hotel in town. Each claimed no vacancies. One manager didn't even open the door fully, shooing them off without words. They sat in the car as dusk fell. Elijah rested his head. Marcia called their family lawyer, no answer. She checked her bank's customer support. "Your account is temporarily suspended due to suspicious activity." She tried several numbers. No one responded, or they hung up. Elijah looked at his mother quietly. "Mom, what's happening?" Marcia didn't answer immediately. She redialed a familiar number. It rang once, then cut. "Cannot complete call blocked." He stared. "They're trying to make us disappear." The jail cell was small. No windows, no breeze. Concrete walls painted dull gray. A crooked overhead bulb cast dim light like a vague headache. Calvin sat on the metal cot, back pressed to the wall, hands resting on his lap, legs neatly crossed as if meditating. He didn't fidget, just breathed steadily, not the breath of a prisoner, but of a special ops vet regulating heart rate for a midnight mission. The overhead camera blinked red, but Calvin knew it was fake. Or at least, it didn't record anything useful. 3 hours passed. No one came, no food, no charges. Only the soft beep of the security timer each hour. A note, like an old clock reminding itself it's alive. Calvin was not anxious. He listened to footsteps in the hallway. Morning guard, 14 steps. Pause, turn, 14 back. Night shift came left step heavier, every third step distinct. To any observer, he was still, but in his mind a map of sound, heat, and strategy of every patrolling officer. Near midnight, the door opened. A stranger stepped in, no uniform. Blue shirt, khakis, old briefcase, and the face of the questioner. "Mr. Brooks," he said, sitting across, "I'm Peterman, County Internal Security Advisor." Calvin didn't respond. He watched, neither aggressive nor menacing, just eyes that refused to wait for explanations. "We need clarity on a few things. If you cooperate, this ends soon." Peterman began evenly. "Then ask," Calvin replied, as though he were the interviewer. Peterman opened his folder. "You served in Kandahar, 2009-2011, 2 overseas tours, 3 commendations." "That's a record, not a question." Peterman smirked. "Then why did a well-trained man like you disciplined, controlled act violently toward Officer Harlan in public?" "How do you define violent?" Calvin countered. "I never laid a hand on him. I only stopped him. With a military technique. A reflex when someone with a gun yanked my child from the table without cause." Peterman furrowed. He changed tone. "Many methods exist to exhaust someone. You don't need long detention. Just make them feel forgotten." Calvin chuckled softly. "I've been alone, 72 hours in the desert. No water, no signal. That didn't exhaust me." Peterman slumped in his chair, baffled. A man held 12 hours in detention and still composed was more unsettling than any shouting suspect. "I'll ask one final question," he said. "Do you regret intervening? If you'd let your son be checked, perhaps none of this would have happened." Calvin stared long and silently, then replied slowly, "Once. A man stood in a field as a wolf approached. He didn't shout or run. He looked the wolf in the eye and said, 'Don't do something you'll regret with blood.'" Peterman frowned. And then Calvin shrugged. "No one knows, except at dawn, they found the wolf dead in the field. No wounds, just a stopped heart." Peterman fell silent. Not because the story was strange, but because he didn't know whether he had just been threatened or saved. The afternoon in Georgia dripped by like honey thinned with water, sticky, slow, and not sweet enough to soothe the soul. Marcia and Elijah sat in the car, parked on the side of the road in a town they'd never heard of, where every door stayed locked despite a tattered welcome sign dangling outside. They were both exhausted. Marcia had made 11 calls, all cut off midstream or met with silence. Elijah hadn't left his phone for 3 straight hours but couldn't keep a single post online for more than 10 minutes. They were being erased from the world one bite at a time. A soft knock on the car window jolted Marcia upright. Elijah instantly lifted his phone, his thumb hovering over the record button. Outside stood a black woman in her 50s, hair neatly braided, wearing a faded denim jacket with frayed cuffs, holding a to-go coffee. "You Marcia Brooks?" she asked, her voice low and slightly raspy. Marcia nodded. "I'm Denise Harmon. I run a small coffee shop called Freedom Cup 2 blocks over. I saw what happened this morning, and I thought it was time someone stepped out of the shadows." Before Marcia could respond, Denise placed the coffee and a bag of savory pastries on the hood. "You haven't eaten all day, right?" Elijah stepped out cautiously. "You're here to help," Marcia asked, hopeful. "I was once in your shoes," Denise said. Her eyes weren't soft, they were sharp, belonging to someone who'd survived what others were just beginning to face. They followed Denise to her shop. Freedom Cup sat tucked behind a laundromat and an abandoned pharmacy. Inside, the space felt strangely warm, oak wood floors, golden lights, hand-painted murals. Behind the counter was a pinboard crammed with photos, complaint letters, and official notices of health and administrative inspections. "You've been through this?" Elijah asked, staring at a red-stamped document. "Shut down." "Yes," Denise answered without dragging the moment out. "I ran a breakfast diner on 9th Street. I spoke up after a cop pinned a 13-year-old black kid in the schoolyard." Marcia frowned. "And then?" "They hit me with 3 tax audits in 2 weeks. A closure order for unidentified mold. Suppliers refused to work with me, and customers stopped coming for fear of being associated with me." Denise topped off Marcia's coffee. "They didn't need to hurt me. They just needed to make people stop believing I was worth listening to." Elijah leaned back. Fixation on Denise. "Why did you keep going?" "I couldn't stand having evidence, merit, and moral clarity and still being forced to bow down." Denise relaxed into her chair and took a sip. "Because I recognized the Danner group the moment they showed up. I smelled their type from the start, that sense of entitlement, that they can make someone disappear without digging a grave." Marcia gripped her cup like it was fragile. "So you're saying there's a chance for us?" "I believe you have a chance," Denise replied, determination shining in her eyes, "and I've got a little something that might help." Marcia and Elijah exchanged looks. What is it they asked together? Denise didn't speak. She swiveled her chair, dusting off an old case from behind the counter. "Start with this," she said, "and if you're ready, I know someone who can finish it." Marcia sat in front of an old computer in the Freedom Cup back room. The flickering fluorescent glow reflected off a wooden table littered with complaint letters, food safety citations, and tattered flyers from civil rights campaigns that had once been silenced. Elijah, peering at a laptop next to her, searched for the video from Mama Ray's that captured Rick Harlan grabbing him and Calvin delivering that precise, quiet touch that silenced everyone. It used to be on 3 major platforms. Now, nothing. "No way," Elijah murmured. "I saved the link. It's still there." He clicked the link. "Error 451. Content unavailable for legal reasons." Marcia looked up. "What does that mean?" "It was taken down for legal reasons," Elijah said, eyes glued to the screen, "which means someone with power filed an official takedown." Marcia searched the title on alternative platforms. Only partial reposts remained, no original video. No comments, no context. Some accounts that re-uploaded even got suspended, flagged under community standards violations. Denise entered with a tray of hot ginger tea and peered over their shoulders. "They did it, just like I thought," she said, placing the tray down. "No guns, no handcuffs. Just erased it as if it never happened." Elijah switched to a private browser, scouring underground forums for backup sources. Nothing. "Even the so-called uncensored platforms have vanished it," he muttered. Marcia revisited her morning Facebook post. It had over 200 shares in the first hour. It was gone. Your account is temporarily blocked from posting for 24 hours. She let out a bitter laugh, unamused, not angry, but incredulous. Elijah, she said, this is no longer just about your dad. It's the system trying to wipe out any trace this ever happened. Denise nodded slowly by the window. Do you know why I kept that old file box? She asked. To have proof so no one can say you only spoke by mouth. No, Denise answered, distant, because I want evidence. So one day, when someone else is erased, I can point and say, no, they existed. I saw them. I heard them. I wrote it down. They sat together in that small back room, in the darkened heart of a town where every connection could be unplugged silently. No guns, no batons, no bloodied aftermath, just clicks. A video's disappearance, a post blocked, a memory rewritten as fake news. Elijah looked at his mom with firm resolve. We have to get that video back. Mom. Otherwise they'll believe. Dad was the one in the wrong. Marcia nodded slowly. And if we don't act fast, she said, in just a few days, no one will even remember it happened. Night had fallen by the time Elijah reached Dixon's Auto and Fuel. Inside, a lone old cashier and 2 aisles under exhausted fluorescent lights. Behind the counter, a kid in a gray beanie with big headphones was typing something into an ancient computer. Elijah tapped the counter. Hey, Troy. The cashier carefully removed his headphones, his hazel eyes lifting with calculated laziness. Elijah Troy frowned, then gave a quiet smile. Long time. You still running Ubuntu on this station? Elijah asked. Troy nodded. Nobody knows I dual boot it. Letting them think I'm slow is the fastest way not to get asked anything. Elijah scoped the place. Denise waited in the car. Marcia circled, vigilant, protecting this clandestine meet. I need your help, Elijah said. Voice lowered. Did you capture that video from Mama Ray's? Troy froze. His expression sharpened, not naive, not random. Yes, he replied. I watched it right before it got deleted. My machine didn't save it, but I set up a temporary RAM buffer. Elijah sat up. You can. If the system hasn't been shut down or overwritten, I can retrieve the cached original, maybe partial, but enough to reconstruct the video. So, you can do it. Troy removed his beanie, revealing long hair tied back. He began typing hotkeys. The whole town thinks I'm a slacker, he said calmly. No big deal. They don't need to know. Elijah stared at the setup dual monitors, external hard drives, a mini server on a local network. Troy smirked. Want to know my Reddit handle? Elijah held his breath. Troy turned the screen to show user, undercover tiger status archived, wanted, suspended from 3 networks. Elijah slumped. You're... Yep. Troy nodded. I've hacked into 3 police departments' internal records. Not to destroy anything, just to see what they're hiding. 20 minutes later, a grainy but legible clip played on the screen, Rick grabbing Elijah, Calvin stepping up, the soft retreat, silence enveloping the diner. Audio's incomplete, but the visuals are clear. Troy ran an open-source video tool to enhance the frame, increase contrast, and auto-generate captions. It's under a minute, but it's enough evidence to flip public opinion if released at the right place, at the right time. Marcia walked in. She didn't understand Troy's code, but she read the spark in his eyes. Are you sure they're not tracking you? She asked. Troy grinned. First, I'm cycling through 6 virtual IPs. Second, I'm on a commercial satellite VPN. And third, he opened a drawer and pulled out a pristine USB drive. I never upload it directly from where I live. Marcia accepted the USB. Elijah, let's go. We've got one more stop. Where to? The place where if they want to silence us, they'd have to silence millions. 10:30 a.m. The small back room of Freedom Cup was cleared out like a pop-up filming studio. Rough wood plank walls draped in black, a ring of LED lights hanging on a wire rack, and an old Bluetooth lapel mic Denise once used for live streaming coffee demos. Marcia Brooks sat up straight in front of the camera. Her hair was pulled back. She wore a simple white blouse, no heavy makeup. Her eyes were steady and clear, carrying the weight of a mother, a wife, and a citizen who has reached her limit of endurance. Elijah checked the live stream setup. Troy, the hacker, sat quietly in the corner and nodded. 3 platforms were ready to go. Elijah softly recording live. Signals strong simultaneously streaming on 3 platforms. Marcia, no hashtags yet. Let the people name it in their own words. 3, 2, 1. The red live light clicked on. Marcia looked directly into the camera. No script, no effects, just a black woman speaking the truth no one wanted to hear. Hello, I'm Marcia Brooks, an elementary school teacher, wife of a Navy veteran, and the mother of a 17-year-old boy who was yanked from the breakfast table like a criminal because of his skin, his hoodie, and a man who believed he had the right to act without reason. She paused, took a breath. Behind the camera, the room was still as a church. They arrested my husband without a warrant. They froze my credit card without notice. Denied us a lawyer, refused us a room, denied our very existence. But what they forgot is this: when people have nothing left to lose, they begin to speak up. Marcia nodded to Elijah. The screen flashed to a split window. The restored original video began to play. No edits, no music, no captions. Just truth. Rick Harlan walked to the table. He grabbed Elijah. Calvin stepped in his eyes, cold, movement precise. Rick recoiled, stepping back, his face twisting like he'd just touched an electric socket. The diner went silent. No one helped. No one spoke. The clip ended on Calvin's face, no anger, no fear, just the clarity of understanding the weight of silence. Back to Marcia in full frame. They thought they could control this story, erase the evidence, disconnect us, force us into silence. But this video shows one thing: we did not lose control. We were waiting for the right moment to tell our story in our words. Marcia straightened her spine. Voice steady, no need to shout. Don't share this video because it shocks. Share it so that one day, the person pulled from their breakfast table might be your son, your father, you. She paused. And if you choose not to share, that's okay too, because the system has taught us that safety means silence. But today, I choose not to be silent. The stream ended. The view counter began ticking 100, 600, 2,400, 5,000. Elijah sat still, eyes on the skyrocketing view count. Denise pressed a hand to Marcia's shoulder, a silent affirmation. You did it. Right thing. Right time. Marcia didn't watch the shares. She didn't glance at notifications or look at anyone. She closed her eyes and whispered, this wasn't media strategy. It was self-defense by speaking out. In the 4 hours after the live stream, Marcia's video reached over 100,000 views. No ads, no PR team, no media help. Just an old phone, a stable connection, and a genuine voice telling an unauthorized truth. The first trending share came from a small account. I'm also a black mom. I cried listening to Marcia, because I remember being scared when my son wore a black hoodie in public. #Free Calvin Brooks. Another, my husband is a Marine. I thought nothing like this could happen at home. We were wrong. #Justice for Elijah. 2. Hashtag they touched the wrong family. 3 hours later, hashtag Free Calvin Brooks was a top 5 hashtag on Twitter nationwide. By morning, it was on Google Trends, along with Weather Tomorrow and NBA Trade Deadline. A Facebook group with over 1 million members reposted the clip with the caption, "You don't need to know Krav Maga to understand this was the reflex of someone who's protected the country, and now, that country is locking him up for no reason." Veteran forums sprang into action. The Navy SEAL Retirees Forum publicly posted Calvin's honors. Silver Star, Combat Action Ribbon, Joint Service Commendation Medal, Navy SEAL Instructor, Class 218. They even shared a quote from Calvin's 2016 Memorial Day speech in Pensacola. "I didn't fight to be a hero. I fought so my son wouldn't be afraid to sit down for breakfast." That quote was shared over 30,000 times, printed on shirts, made into posters, quoted at the top of news feeds like a rallying cry. By now, Marcia sat before her computer, free from could not connect or account temporarily restricted messages. She stared at the flashing hashtags. Hashtag Free Calvin Brooks, hashtag Mama Rays Did Nothing, hashtag We See You Danner. Her phone vibrated non-stop foreign numbers. Unknown contacts. A DC civil rights lawyer, we offer pro bono legal support. A content producer, I have a contact at CNN. Would you do an interview tonight? A local nurse, I've seen Harlan treat black people like this. I was afraid to speak, but I will now. Elijah sat beside her, eyes bright. "Mom," he said, "we sent out a signal for help, and now people are answering with their own voices." Marcia said nothing. She simply rested her hand on the USB stick that held the video, a silent thank you to Troy, the gas station kid who became the gatekeeper for an entire community. On the other side of town, Sheriff Clyde Danner sat in a sealed meeting with advisors. Their screens displayed the trending hashtags. Sheriff Danner gripped his coffee cup as if he could crush it bare-handed. "Social media is not a court," he growled. "No, sir," someone replied, "but it can deliver a verdict before the trial even starts." Back at Freedom Cup, Denise watched Marcia step outside. A small crowd had gathered, not a protest. No banners, just people standing, holding space. The faces of those who once stayed silent, now nodding in solidarity because someone spoke for them. 1948. The studio lights burned softly, not dazzling, but enough to keep the focus on Marcia's shifting eyes. She sat motionless on the worn upholstery, hands folded in her lap, spine straight, feet grounded. She didn't move. Across the glass table sat Rachel Lynn, the seasoned anchor from the country's third-largest news network. The intro had aired. The screen read, "The Calvin Brooks case, Navy SEAL veteran detained without cause. His wife speaks out." The camera light turned green, rolling. "Rachel, good evening. I'm Rachel Lynn. Tonight, we bring you the story of a woman who captured the nation's attention with a live stream under 5 minutes. A woman who told a story many are calling proof that our justice system has been twisted." The camera cut to Marcia. "Rachel, Mrs. Brooks, thank you for joining us. Before we dive deeper, may I ask, what did you study?" Marcia, smiling, "Education. I'm an elementary school teacher. Before that, I studied psychology and debate. I was the Georgia State debate champion in 2002. Rachel paused, so did viewers. Marcia didn't boast, she stated facts erased by the system but remembered by her. Rachel, without the video, do you think people would believe you? Marcia, without hesitation, no. I think they'd doubt, reinterpret, forget. Rachel, why? Marcia, a black woman speaking out about injustice without a camera is like breathing in a room full of alarms. You hear something, but no one listens. And if someone does, someone will ask, "Are you sure? Did you misunderstand?" Rachel nodded, exhaling softly. The shot switched angles. Rachel. Now that the story is out, and the hashtag #FreeCalvinBrooks is spreading, what do you want from the system? Marcia didn't speak immediately. She sat taller, not to show strength, but to open room for what she would say next. She looked into the lens, not at Rachel. "Marcia, I don't want it to undo the wrong." A pause full of weight. "Marcia, I just want it to know I don't need it anymore." Silence filled the studio. Rachel opened her mouth to ask more, but stopped. Not because she had no follow-up, but because Marcia's words had already sealed a moment in history, without needing anything else. The camera captured Marcia's face, not angry, not resentful, not performative. Just the gaze of someone who has crossed the boundary and knows silence is no longer an option. That night, a 60-second clip from the interview spread even faster than the original broadcast. It wasn't just shared for content, it was shared because her voice carried a clarity the nation had forgotten. The most liked comment on the clip came from a third-year law student. "I've read hundreds of legal opinions. I've never seen one sentence close a courtroom like that." The FBI office in Atlanta has no exterior sign. It's just a gray concrete building 3 stories tall, frosted glass windows, and silent trees lining the sidewalk. In the second-floor briefing room, fluorescent lights flicker as if accustomed to classified documents. Special Agent Andrea Vega, short black hair, eyes like a CT scanner, is standing before a projector. Next to her is Strategic Technical Agent 2, Marshall Quinn, tall and thin, quiet, wearing glasses that give off an IT vibe, but once deployed in Afghanistan. On the screen, in bold, County Sub-4 Detention, Source Tracing Report for Civil Complaint Intake. Andrea clicks her remote. The screen shows Calvin Brooks' mugshot, then the clip from Marcia's Livestream, followed by a grainy map of Sub-4's underground layout. No arrest warrant, no detention record, no transport logs, she says, each word dropping like a rubber bullet. Yet the detainee is a former SEAL, a Silver Star recipient, and once a senior tactical instructor. Marshall speaks for the first time. There's evidence of a local-level interference, but if we go in directly, they'll erase everything. Andrea nods. Then you'll go in just not as an FBI agent. Marshall opens his backpack and pulls out a toolkit: electrical tape, power clip cables, insulated gloves, and a mini external hard drive. Fake ID contractual CCTV maintenance tech. Reason to enter checking video feeds after a minor power outage. She hands him the final dossier. You won't be alone. Someone inside has already set up your position. He's on the night shift in the security control room, alias Eddie Collins. Marshall frowns at the description, then pauses. Eddie is 6 feet tall, ex-service, deployed to Yemen in 2009. Andrea nods. Marshall blinks, lips tight. I know him. The next morning, an unmarked white van pulls up to the Sub-4 detention back entrance. A Metro Systems Maintenance Division sticker is fixed to the side. Inside, Marshall is dressed as a maintenance technician. He carries a clipboard, shaves clean, wears Walmart brand work boots, and walks with a slight limp, deliberate. A guard glances at his papers and waves him through. No one is suspicious of a camera repairman. He enters the B2 corridor, bleach-scented, damp walls, low ceilings, ancient dome cameras yellowed with age. He knocks 3 times on the control room door per protocol. The door opens. Behind it stands a tall black man in gray maintenance coveralls, gloves on, next to the electronic control panel. Eddie, Marshall whispers. The man looks, then smiles, softly subdued, emotional. Didn't expect you on this one. Still remember how I showed you to squeeze a trigger in the fog. Marshall clasps his hand. Not a day forgotten, sir. The control room door closes behind them. Inside, it smells of hot plastic, electrical dust, and stale machine heat. Eddie removes his gloves and hands over a rugged external hard drive. This one still works. They moved to the new system last year, but I've been secretly mirroring data. The new one's just for official reports. This one's for preventing intentional memory loss. Marshall plugs it in. The screen displays. Backup server AES 256 encryption parallel since March 2021. How many power outages, he asks, fingers ready on the keyboard. Exactly, 17. But Eddie enters commands. Only 6 are in the official power logs. What about the other 11? No records. No reports. But the cameras go dark for about 23 minutes each time, coincidentally, when black inmates are led into isolation. Marshall lifts his head. So they caused the outages to wipe footage in real time. Eddie nods. And the files get marked as corrupted, so they're never extracted. On paper, they have cameras. In reality, they don't. Marshall scans the logs. They read. Make file, copy, edit, 11/02. Inmate admitted, name Taylor, black. Male, 11/09. B wing, camera, signal error, 11:36. Recording resumes, overwriting previous footage, 11:37. Power loss due to UPS error, professional, Marshall murmurs. Eddie folds his arms, staring at the screen like at an unburied corpse. This isn't an accident. It's a mechanism. They locate Calvin Brooks' entry date. A 14-minute, 36-second outage. B2 corridor camera labeled power fault. When recording resumes, it starts from blank, no one visible, no audio. So, from drop-off to processing, nothing exists. Marshall confirms. Eddie opens an entry-exit log. Look, he says, no one went in or out during the blackout except one person. Marshall reads Mallister, Brent, Deputy Patrol Chief in B2 at 11:17, out at 11:41. Deputy Patrol Chief Mallister, he's not staff here. But he's Sheriff Danner's enforcer, Eddie explains quietly. He only appears when someone needs quieting, without evidence. Marshall dumps the files, video logs, blackout timestamps, camera overrides, system logs, and records Eddie's testimony with his body cam mic. We have enough for a federal case, he says. No, Eddie shakes his head. Just about enough. Still missing one piece. What piece? Eddie retrieves a fabric-wrapped USB used for secure audio only. At noon that day, I turned on audio logging from my post to test hallway mics. It captured voices near the cells. Marshall accepts it. What's on it? Eddie's eyes darken. Someone said, make sure he stays quiet, like last month's kid. Marshall pockets the USB, small and lightweight yet holding unleashed power. He glances at Eddie. You sure it hasn't been overwritten? Absolutely, Eddie assures. I encrypted it, hidden. Even if they check, they'll see only noise. Marshall nods, puts his cam back on, and stands. I'm forwarding this to the Federal Audio Forensics team, but before leaving, I need to see him. Calvin Eddie hesitates. Long odds. That wing's tightly locked. I don't need a break, just to know he's breathing. 10 minutes later, Eddie escorts Marshall down a camera maintenance passage to B3. Dim lights, damp walls, air ducts rattling. At the end stands a nameless steel door, locked. No guard. Eddie cuts power to the hallway camera for exactly 22 seconds. Let's go, he says. 22 seconds is all we get. Through the fogged glass, Marshall sees Calvin Brooks seated on a metal cot motionless, back straight, fists on knees, eyes closed. Marshall realizes it's a SEAL-controlled breathing posture. Calvin doesn't speak, but when he opens his eyes, he sees Marshall and the message is clear he already knew he was coming. In a single glance, more unspoken than a greeting. "You came, sir," Marshall whispers. They step back just before the 22 seconds are up. That evening at the Atlanta FBI office, the audio is analyzed with denoising tools. The feed is noisy footsteps, guard radios, dripping pipes. At minute 03:41, a voice is clear, cool, unwavering. "Make him stay quiet, like last month's kid." It's understated, but it carries the weight of behavior repeating murder by erasure. Andrea Vega, listening, turns to Marshall. "Last month, who?" Marshall shakes his head. No record, no death certificate. She calls federal records. Within 12 minutes, she confirms 19-year-old Javon M. Ellis, arrested for resisting arrest at the farmer's market. His detention record marked escaped after 3 days. No trial, no body returned. Family still searching. Andrea grips her folder. We need identification grid connection to link that death to this case. Marshall looks up. Calvin will know. In the cell again. Calvin sits still. But in his mind, Javon Ellis flickers into focus like a wave memory. He remembers the boy, bright-eyed, soft features, small stature, locked next door to him overnight shaking, crying. He coached him to calm breaths. Next morning, Javon was transferred, and never heard from again. Calvin stares at the wall, internally whispering as if across a wall to someone. "Javon, I never saved you, but this time, I'll make them remember your name and fear it." Morning at County Sub 4. Detention passed like any other cold, damp, and ominously silent. Calvin Brooks sat on the metal cot, counting footsteps echoing down the hall. Morning shift, 2 guards. Shift, change 3. Medical alone 1, always alone. He'd watched this for 6 days. Same times, same routines. Today, he chose to break the pattern. 8:07 a.m. A key turned. A steel door clanked open. The on-duty medic, a middle-aged white man with thinning hair and a scowl, entered carrying a clipboard. "Name," he barked without looking up. "Brooks, Calvin. Sit still. Blood pressure." Calvin extended his arm, muscles slack, eyes distant like just waking from a long, exhausting night. When the cuff tightened, he stared at a small yellow stain on the opposite wall no bigger than a thumbprint. He drew a deep breath and counted backward. 3, 2, 1. Calvin jerked violently to the side, slamming his head against the cot, then collapsed to the floor. His breathing was heavy and labored. His right hand curled inward. Fake froth salt and spit formed at the corners of his mouth. Hey, the medic panicked. "Brooks, you hear me?" Calvin stayed limp. The medic radioed code blue, segregation cell, possible stroke, unlock the medical door. 8:12 a.m. Calvin was rolled out on a stretcher. His eyes were closed, breaths slow and intentional. He memorized every squeak of the wheels, the curve, the wall texture, the tile give. 2 guards approached. Relaxed, they thought he was dying. At the medical room's threshold, they unlocked the door. "Lay him on the bed," the medic ordered. "EKG leads and saline IV." 8:14 a.m. Calvin was strapped to the bed, leads attached. As the medic turned away to get syringes, Calvin cracked his eyes open. His left hand flexed, pressing a lead to block the EKG signal. His right hand produced a small plastic medical blade hidden under the cot since yesterday's fake fever, not to hurt, but to cut his ankle restraint. He shifted and freed his foot. When the medic turned back, crack! The overhead light flashed. At the same instant, Calvin sprung up, grabbed the sterile towel from the tray, wrapped it tightly around the medic's neck enough to knock him off balance, not choke him. The medic collapsed unconscious. Calvin stooped, pulled a first aid key from the medic's coat, not to flee but to access the emergency equipment cabinet. 8:17 a.m. He stood alone in the medical room, clutching a blueprint of ventilation ducts and escape routes he'd spotted on day one. It included Navy-style technical symbol signs only a senior service member would know. He whispered to the map. The exit finds you where they never thought someone would remember. He shed his patient gown, revealing a dark undershirt light, sweat-ready, slim enough to slip through tight spaces. He laced up his shoes, posture straight, heartbeat steady. And finally, control returned. He slipped through a service door behind the medication cabinet, a staff route for hauling out medical waste. The duct was just wide enough for a fit man if you control your breath. He started crawling elbows, knees tight, limbs brushing the metal walls, sometimes cold, sometimes sweltering, like a wounded gazelle navigating debris, refusing to fall. Ahead, an industrial fan junction, a fixed marker he could hear every 9 minutes like clockwork. Its vroom, vroom, matched those he'd installed in the West Wing of the White House back in 2013 during a security retrofit. A smirk pulled at his lips. He used a sliver from an IV line as a makeshift pick. When the fan slowed, he slipped his hand between the blades at the dead spot and... Click, the fan stopped. He slipped through clean. No cuts. Now he stood in the technical corridor between wings C and D. Elevated cameras tracked every 22 seconds. Between sweeps, there was 1.4 seconds of blind space. He waited, counting, calculating. 18, 19, 20, now. He darted around the corner like a shadow, no noise, no silhouette. He reached the main security door, faced with a keypad of an outdated county jail. Nobody suspected he knew the code, but he didn't need it. He crouched and removed the panel below the keypad, revealing the backup control board. His fingers touched 3 contact points, a method taught only to those who wrote these systems for the NSA. He tapped in. P, D, Q power bypass, delay lock, quiet exit. Beep, beep, clack. The door opened silently. No alarm, no fanfare. Outside was the admin wing, the same corridor Sheriff Danner patrolled at random. One camera across the hall. Calvin slipped into the shadows behind the water machine and pulled out a microphone phone hidden under his shirt one FBI had built into his medical gown on day 1. He powered it up, green light flashed twice. Signal linked, encrypting video for live transmission. Footsteps approached, heavy, measured. Calvin didn't need to look, he recognized them. Danner. The sheriff came into view, calm expression, but right hand tucked behind his jacket, the classic stance of a man about to threaten someone without leaving a stain. Calvin stepped into the light, erect, holding the duct pipe not as weapon but as messenger. I knew you'd come. Danner froze. You think you're getting away, he growled. Calvin raised the phone camera, pointed at him. Screen blazed red live feed. Sheriff Clyde Danner standing over a jail cell with firearm and threats. This is live at FBI HQ in Atlanta. Calvin smiled. I'm not running. Danner, you just stepped right into the frame. Sheriff Clyde Danner stood frozen in the hallway, full uniform glistening under fluorescent lights way overpowered by the spotlight participating. Calvin stood 3 steps away, the duct pipe in hand, a symbol not of force, but of agency. The phone light flickered like a beating heart. Danner sneered. "Shut that off. You don't know who you're playing with." "Oh, I know," Calvin replied lowly. "I'm challenging a man used to ordering people around whenever there's no record. You think live video is your ace. They can delete the footage. Jam the signal." "Not this one," Calvin said calmly, lifting the pipe higher. "It's encrypted relay from this jail to FBI Atlanta. Right now, Agents Vega and Quinn are within earshot." Danner hesitated, his carefully crafted calculations suddenly unraveling. He wasn't afraid of truth. He feared truth heard by those who couldn't be bought. "What do you want?" he spat. "I want you to say it," Calvin said, fixing his gaze. "The words you told Mallister last week, make him stay quiet, like last month's kid." Danner clenched his jaw. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, you do, because I taught a guy who now stands behind this camera all your master keys, every cut to the surveillance system, every live broadcast, from the very control center of this jail." Danner scanned the corridor, no help near. He took a step toward Calvin, but Calvin held up the pipe not as threat, but as a fulcrum. "One more move and you carve your name into history," Calvin said softly. In that drawn-out tension, Danner took a step back. His lips thinned. His eyes met the camera. "You want to undo everything," he snarled. "Years I've kept this town clean. No junk, no trouble, no protests. You think you'll be welcomed?" Calvin didn't respond. He bowed his head, exhaled slowly, looked back up. No anger, just a soldier's sorrow betrayal of a country once trusted. You call handcuffing a 17-year-old kid in a diner maintenance of peace, locking a man without warrant, erasing records, deceiving cameras. That's how you keep things clean. Calvin took a step forward, deliberate, enough to visibly unbalance Danner. "I don't need you to admit guilt," he said. "I just need people to see you as you are without a script." Behind them, Eddie Collins monitored the hallway via Livestream screen. Marshal Quinn recorded audio in parallel gear, and from Atlanta, Andrea Vega sent the message. "Issue preliminary charges. Deploy arrest warrant immediately." The machinery of justice started turning not because of someone shouting, but because one man turned on a camera at the exact moment the man with the badge expected no witness. Danner pulled his gun but didn't raise it. The red recording light blinked on. Calvin set the pipe at his feet. He raised both hands. "You want to arrest me again?" he asked. "Fine. Do it, in front of a nation." Danner froze. No one moved. A week after the live stream that shook the nation, Auburn Grove is no longer the town that made headlines over an old diner called Mama Ray's. Posters declaring #Justice for Brooks grace the high school gates. The barbershop hangs a banner reading, "We stand with Calvin." Mothers walking their kids across the street whisper, "He who taught them to be silent no longer thinks silence is the only way." That morning, the old St. Elmo Church Hall, formerly used only for weddings and birthday parties, has been transformed into a makeshift press center. Cameras are set in 3 corners. Plastic chairs are arranged in 4 long rows. At the front, a hand-lettered sign reads, "Justice doesn't come if you wait. Justice comes when you step out and claim it." Calvin Brooks enters alongside his wife and son. They're dressed simply not in black or white, but a deep navy, the color of people who haven't declared victory, but have already refused defeat. Marcia holds Calvin's hand. Elijah walks between them, now taller than his dad, yet trailing a step behind quiet respect in his stance. Behind them stands Victor Knox, a dignified black man in his 50s wearing a navy suit. His presence that of someone who once rattled Senate seats during the 2018 Flint water crisis hearings. He faced dozens of cameras back then and spoke as though talking to someone across a kitchen table. He nods to Calvin, steps to the podium, placing a thick legal file atop it as though delivering an indictment in person. "Good morning," Victor begins, voice firm and clear. "I stand here not just for one wrongly arrested man. I stand for hundreds who have been detained, erased from records, dismissed as isolated incidents, nameless to us all. Today, we give them their names back." The room echoes with the soft click-clack of reporters' keyboards. He continues, "We have filed a federal lawsuit under the 4th and 14th Amendments charges of unlawful detention, psychological torture, and denial of legal access. Defendants include the Auburn Grove Police Department, Sheriff Clyde Danner, and all individuals involved at County Sub 4 detention." He pauses. "And yes, we demand justice not only for Mr. Brooks, we demand recognition for every person forced into silence in this town." Marcia steps forward. Her voice is composed, reminiscent of her live stream. "My family isn't here to shame this town. We're here to remind it that everyone deserves to learn how to live as a person again." Elijah grips the microphone, his fingers trembling slightly. "My father once told me it takes 3 seconds to become a victim, and a lifetime to decide to stand up again. Today, my dad stood." The auditorium breaks into applause, respectful, powerful, not raucous, but enough to ripple through the crowd. Finally, Calvin steps forward. He doesn't look into any camera. He looks into the faces before him. Someone sees their fear, their regret, their gratitude. "I'm not forgiving him," Calvin says calmly, "because I don't need anyone to apologize. I just need this system to understand it was exposed for what it truly is." He turns to Victor Knox. "Justice isn't a destination. Justice is the way we walk step by step without ever bowing." Dawn in Auburn Grove sees reporters already lined up outside the town jail. No shouting, no chants, just microphones held like spears aimed at a fortress losing its immunity. 8:14 a.m. Doors open. Sheriff Clyde Danner, still wearing his uniform but without the badge, walks out, flanked by 2 federal marshals. His hands are cuffed with gleaming stainless steel identical to those he once used on many, without explanation. His face remains expressionless, but a careful observer sees his lips set tight, his eyes staring past the symbolism. "Anything to say to the public?" reporters ask. "Do you admit to abusing your power? Are you aware the recording has been made public?" Danner says nothing. He's led into the prisoner transport van. Doors close, cameras flash like summer snow. At the Regional District Court, the arraignment is expedited. The courtroom is more packed than anyone here has ever seen. Some have never set foot in a court. Some who feared even entering local spaces are here. An elderly man in the last row whispers, "I was once pulled from my car because I turned without signaling. I came today to see he's no longer the law." The judge reads the charges. Clyde Danner charged with 3 federal counts: unlawful detention, tampering with and destroying evidence, civil rights violations. Danner's only response, not guilty. The room remains quietly tense, no cheering, but the silence is thick, like a cracked wall finally hearing the light on the other side. In the courthouse hallway, Victor Knox confers with his team. Marcia waits, watching the line of supporters stretching beyond the courthouse steps. Elijah whispers to his mother, "Do you think they actually believe he was wrong?" Marcia pauses, then answers soberly, "They don't have to believe. They just need to see, and if they look long enough, they will." That evening, news broadcasts show the moment Danner was escorted away slow motion. No sound, text overlay. Longtime sheriff arrested on 3 federal charges, entire country watching. Elsewhere, people begin digging into old cases, the non-cooperative detainees, the camera malfunctions, the missing teens never officially logged. #Brooks is not alone trends nationwide. 1 week later, During his next hearing, Danner arrives wearing an orange jumpsuit. Facing him across the table is the Brooks family. Calvin shows no anger. He doesn't look away. He looks straight at the man who once bound and erased him. Victor files new evidence detailing every localized power outage in detention, coinciding with detentions of black individuals. An audio clip plays the chilling words echo across the courtroom. Make him stay quiet, like last month's kid. No one responds. Not even Danner's former defenders have anything left to argue. Post-hearing. Calvin steps into the courtyard where some high schoolers wait. A young girl raises her hand to wave. Calvin nods not because he's a hero, but because today, justice has a face, not a symbol. 1 month later, the first federal settlement is announced. $7.2 million distributed under provisions for wrongful imprisonment, civil rights violations, and psychological harm. Victor presents the documents to the Brooks family in his wood-paneled office. This isn't justice, he says firmly, but if there is such a thing as recompense, this is what the law allows for now. Marcia exchanges a look with Calvin. Elijah sits beside them, silent as the first day they entered. Calvin speaks not a word. He pulls another folder from his bag, a blueprint for a community center. 2 weeks later, the press reports, the Brooks family declines personal use of the funds. Instead, they'll invest the entire amount in founding the Blue Line Center for Black Youth Resilience, a facility offering training in crisis response, social psychology, and rebuilding self-worth. The first center stands in Auburn Grove, the town that once shut its doors to them. It's built beside the now-closed Mama Ray's, which has been converted into a community cafe run by Denise Harmon. On opening day, there's no MC, no live stream, just over 60 black teens signing up for the inaugural classes. Each student receives an indigo notebook stamped in silver with the words, "You were never the problem. You just walked into a room built to shrink you." Inside the main hall, a plaque bears Calvin's words. We're not using this money to relive the past. We're using it to prepare a new generation, so they don't have to relive adults' mistakes. 3 months later, the trial concludes. Sheriff Clyde Danner is sentenced to 11 years in federal prison with no parole and permanently banned from public office. Before exiting the courthouse, the judge addresses Calvin. Mr. Brooks, under the law, you have the right to a public apology from the defendant. Would you like to accept it? Calvin stands. The room grows quiet. Media cameras train on him. He does not look at the judge or at Danner. He looks at a sidewall mirror reflecting everyone present. Then he says, softly as dawn's breath, "No, thank you," because every morning he'll have to apologize to himself, looking in the mirror. Danner bows his head. For the first time since the trial began, he is completely silent. No rebuttal, no gag order, just a man, facing himself without anyone left to shield him. That evening at the community center, Elijah stands before his first class teaching how to stay calm when falsely accused. Through the glass window, Calvin watches his son, eyes steady, not proud, not boastful, just one feeling. I survived, so others don't have to learn how to survive. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.